Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Confessions of a Fitness Manager. I'm Staci. With me, as always, is Miss Jessica. We are excited to talk and speak to all things hiring, final episode of hiring. So, episode 4 of our hiring kind of series, but technically episode 5 of the podcast. Jessica, what are you drinking today?
Oh, Stacy. Wow, I'm so glad you asked. It is about 15 degrees here in Chicago. So I have a giant mug of hot chocolate and I'm using the mug that I got from our trip to Park City, our girls trip.
Yay! That
It's
was so
got
much
lots of whipped
fun.
cream. It was so much fun. So lots of whipped cream because it's needed. So it's delicious and it's keeping me warm. What are you drinking today, Stacy?
I love it. I can't imagine 15 degrees.
Well,
15.
it's a little chilly.
It's cold. I have some wonderful, refreshing, clean, crisp ice water today. It's keeping me nice and hydrated. We've actually had the opposite experience in the Pacific Northwest more recently. Yesterday was like 65, and like I was walking with a friend and I was roasting. I wore long pants, a jacket just in case, because in the Northwest, you just don't know. You see the sun, you're like, it's still probably pretty cold in March, and it was perfect yesterday. So I think I even got like a little sunburn on my face. I'm
Stop.
happy
I
with
don't want to
that.
hear that.
I know, rude. So it was awesome. So yeah, we had a little bit of nice weather, but it was like the fake spring. And then the next few weeks are very cold and wet, just in time for the first day of spring.
Great.
So,
Great. I'm so jealous because it's like too cold to go out and do anything right now.
man, I hope it warms up because it looks beautiful in Chicago in the summer. It looks
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. Oh, summer is great. Summer is great. Winter, not so much. So it's gonna be pretty rough probably until about May. And
Mm,
then you should come for a visit and experience Chicago, and we'll do all kinds of fun things.
perfect. Perfect timing.
Great.
So like we said earlier, we are speaking about hiring episode 4. So we wrapped up auditions, and we kind of wanted to mention or encourage you after you do your auditions. And we had recommended doing group auditions if you can, or offering the ability for a participant to be basically an employee at your facility, so they can attend the class if there's a class audition, or the session, maybe they're a Pilates client to be a trial for an instructor who might work with you. Now is the time to collect their feedback. So after that audition, and the really interesting thing is, I don't know if you remember, Jessica, like we get different feedback from different people. Like
Hmm.
I was always surprised sometimes. Like I would think an applicant was amazing, and then I'd get this, it was too easy, or it was the music wasn't great, or the feedback we would get that wasn't things that we had noticed.
Hmm.
So that was pretty valuable.
Yeah, definitely. It's always good to hear different people's experiences because you and I, as managers, when we would audition people, we would look for very specific things. We would have like our little checklist of things that we are looking for and things that we want to see from that instructor. Are they offering options? Are they introducing themselves? Are they setting the class up with the correct equipment? We have our little checklist of things, but participants, whether they're instructors or just average members of your facility or even members of your club who you brought in for the audition, they are not necessarily looking at your checklist. So it's nice to see it from a fresh perspective.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. So from there, let's say you potentially have a second interview. And that's something that I remember Jessica and I did at the luxury health club we worked together at when we were manager and assistant manager. Basically, we would have the audition happen. And then the second interview, we would take them on a tour. We would sit down with them, review our policies, procedures, expectations, review our appearance guidelines once again. And at that point, there were times where even in that second interview, they had already been through the audition. They had already heard us speak to all these things multiple times. And we kind of spoke to this in the interview process, but suddenly they bring up, oh, wait, I'm not comfortable shaving my face, or, So we'll tell some stories about that in a second. Maybe it was during that second interview, but something we also noticed is during this time, where it is more challenging to hire instructors. There are a lot fewer of them and personal trainers applying, and a lot more few of them are even qualified. And when you get to this point in the interview process, do you really want to spend more time when you could just
Mhm.
sweep this person up and bring them onto your team? doing a second interview. So it has been something I feel like we've both been doing less of, because we need to start onboarding them and getting them seeing clients and getting them teaching classes, or they're going to go somewhere else. So that's something we've run into.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. At my new facility, I don't believe I've done a second interview because I feel like at the point where after I've had my phone interview, after I've had my in-person interview, and after I've had my audition, at that point, I either know if I want to hire them or I don't want to hire them. So for me, especially because talent is so few and far between right now, and I feel like that's just across the board with everyone, if I don't act on it then, for all I know, they are going to another audition right after and someone else could grab them. So I want to jump while the iron is hot and just sweep them up while I can. Otherwise, I risk losing them, and I don't have the ability to bring on more good talent. So you're exactly right, Staci. We're just kind of in this area right now where do we even need a second interview?
Yeah, and I think exactly like you said earlier, like by this point, I know I want to hire them. There have even been times where I do their initial interview and maybe like the first 10 minutes of their audition, I'm like, definitely hiring this person. Like but then the ones who you really need to keep seeing over and over again, sometimes that is a sign that it's like, like we're really going to have to work with this person, or we're really going to have to, it can be less of a, we definitely need to hire this person. And so if you have to have the second interview, it doesn't mean you can't hire them. It just means there may be something else that you need to really work with this person on, or consider, and it could still work out.
It could still work out. I mean, one of the things that I do if I'm kind of on the fence with them during their audition is when I offer them feedback, if they accept the feedback and they make adjustments, or if they argue, because I've also seen both. And I know if they're going to argue with me or not understand the feedback that I'm giving them, then it's most likely not going to work out. But if they can accept the feedback or maybe explain why they're doing something a certain way, maybe it's something I didn't understand or didn't come across correctly, but if they can explain it to me, then okay, then they can make adjustments and they might be easy to work with. So at that point, that's kind of a sign for me that I'm willing to bring them on board.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was going to share a quick story about instructor who it was really interesting. It was an instructor that Jessica and I both were exposed to in an audition. He happened to have his own trampoline that he had explained to us that he had like patented and created, and it was a program. It was this whole like thing that he had created to offer fitness facilities like ours when we were working with him. He made it to the audition phase, but even then we were a bit nervous because at our particular location, you were not allowed to have any facial hair as a man. And he had a full on like goatee, I believe, if I remember correctly.
There was definitely a significant amount of facial hair. And at that facility that we were at, Staci, they also, part of their dress code was no visible tattoos. And he had, and he definitely had a sleeve of tattoos on his arm. So we were a little nervous going in, but great personality. And so brought him in for the audition. It was a really fun audition.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was really fun. I remember it being really fun. We got good feedback. The one thing I remember us kind of thinking about was it was fun, but it wasn't the most like organized class. There wasn't like, if he's building programming for this class that he's going to basically tell our instructors they have to do, like to follow that formula, there didn't seem to be a lot of a formula. So that was, I remember, as something we were talking about. Plus, I just wasn't sure as far as liability. If this person had created this piece of equipment that we were now going to potentially have in our facility, we'd have to buy all of them. What does that look like? There were a lot more layers of decisions with this particular applicant. And then it took us, I do also remember it took us a long time to get him back in to do his second interview. I think there was a family emergency, and that stuff happens. Like, they may have a family emergency. The club we worked for, they're about to have an audition actually this week, and I was going to go attend it. And they had to cancel it last minute because the person got sick. So sometimes that will happen. That's not necessarily always a red flag, but I remember that happening. He was kind of pushing it off, not responding for a while. And when they go dark, that's a big problem. I remember. Yeah. I still do.
He started to ghost. Yeah, I remember that. We're just like, because we had a plan to get this program going by
Yeah.
X date, and that date started looming right around the corner. And we're like, where is he? Or do we have to push it back? Do we have to cancel it? Like, marketing materials had gone out at that point.
Yeah. And so we had to we finally got the chance to have a sit down with him. And he immediately was like, don't want to cover my tattoos. I don't want to shave my face. And it just became relevant, I think, to both of us that it was like the amount of work and effort that we're going to put in to support this person and the inability for him to do those two things was just really not going to work out. And since then, you know, there's so many facilities who've lifted those requirements, but which is okay. But I think at that time it was just this battle was not worth being fought. So if you can't get, I guess the like moral of the story is that you can get to all these stages and then there can be something that does come up. And that's just the way hiring goes. Poor Jessica has had to experience that so many times, and she's really in need of some new talent right now, and so am I. And it's such a bummer when you really have these high hopes for these people and then you get to this point where it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to work out. So, and hopefully it happens actually at this stage, because when it happens later, which we're going to speak about in the next episode of our first stages of onboarding, when issues start to arise, then it's much harder to get rid of them than it is before you hire them.
Absolutely.
So that's huge. But any stories from you, Jessica, that you can think of, or
actually, I just thought of one. And Staci, I don't know if you've heard this one or not. So this was from this was an applicant that we hired in-house. So this was a member of our team at my current facility who was front desk staff, and he ended up going out and getting certified, and he wanted to be a personal trainer. So we did an interview with him, and he dressed up for it and everything, like shook my hand, and it was great. Very personable, sweet guy. And he's just, and you know, I knew him because I had worked with him for about 6 months prior to this while he was our front desk staff. Really, really nice, down to earth, humble, sweet guy. Great audition, or great interview, I'll say. Audition was okay. It was a little bit rocky, but again, he was a brand new trainer. He was very green, so I'll give him a little bit of grace for that. And he accepted feedback, and I was willing to work with him on things. So I extended him a verbal offer. He accepted. And Staci, did I ever share this story with you? This was a while ago. Maybe
I don't know. It's not
I don't know
familiar yet.
Okay, so I extended a verbal offer. He got very excited about it. He accepted and went home. Next day, out of nowhere, I feel like someone like got in his head about something, because he came into my office the next day, and it was like someone had flipped a switch. He became very hostile and immediately demanded a sign-on bonus for coming onto my team of trainers. From front desk to trainer, he demanded a sign-on bonus, and I was like, that was never an option. I don't know why you think that you're entitled to that. And he just got very aggressive and was saying how he needs to be the best trainer in Chicago, and how is he going to do that if he is greeting people at the front desk and doing other BS jobs. And it was just such a turn that I didn't quite know how to handle that, because at that point, like, I had never experienced this side of this guy before. And I don't know what happened, because when we left it yesterday, he was excited, and we were talking about how we're going to transition him out of a supporting role in front desk and into a full-time role as a trainer. And I made it very clear this is not going to happen overnight. It'll probably be about a month until you become a full-time trainer, to make sure that you are fully prepared to take on that role and to find someone else to cover for you at the front desk. So I don't know what happened in like a less than 24-hour time period, but he was so hostile and aggressive to me the next day about, in his words, he can't be the best trainer in Chicago if he is doing a BS job at the front desk, and he needs to go full-time right then and there. And the sign-on bonus, it was just a huge turnoff. So at that point, I rescinded the offer, because I didn't want this guy joining my team anymore, because if we haven't even gotten to day one at that point, then, and you're already having this attitude. And he made a couple of, I'm not even going to say it on air because it was so disrespectful, some remarks of my current trainers that I'm like, absolutely not. I'm not going to bring you on board with my team.
No,
that was a rough one.
Well, and for someone being so new, like you said, to have that light switch of a change. And
I don't know where that came from.
Yeah. And I can't help but admit, he hopefully, if only he understood that, like, that's the weird part about fitness is
Yeah.
I feel for facilities and I feel for trainers because it's really difficult to just jump right into being a full-time personal trainer. There is a grace period where you have to gain your clients. You have to put in the work. Once you do and you continue to put in that effort and your clients fall in love with you and they stay with you and you raise your rate and it can become this super like pretty lucrative
Yeah.
job. And when you can do multiple things, it's even better because when the holidays roll around and things get quieter, and that's not his fault, he can then lean on potentially getting some hours at the front desk, like picking up hours. Like, I think that's one of
Yeah.
the best ways for trainers to do it is to have already worked at the facility in another
Oh, totally.
capacity. Yeah, at the facility we worked at in Seattle, it was often the people who worked as like basically concierge, like floating concierge that would help with
Mhm.
towels and help people on the machines. They were paid so much. And then a lot of them got their personal training certification and then did like a hybrid until they
Right.
again were full time. And the club, of course, was like, you go ahead and give up your shift on the floor because you're going to make money for us as a personal trainer.
Mhm.
So head on over to that team. But if you can sub here and there, like it's kind of a brilliant way to do it. And so it's sad that he
Yeah.
didn't see it like that. It wasn't
Yeah,
going to
it
hold
was
him back.
no, and it was such a bummer. And I had told him up until that point that you working at the front desk is an advantage for you because you're going to be so visible and you already know everyone checking in. So you can already have that connection with multiple members established. It's going to be easy to transition them into your personal clients. So that was a really big disappointment for me because I had never had someone go so aggressive in such a short period of time and from a brand new trainer
Mm-hmm.
nonetheless. Like this guy
Yeah.
had no
Yeah.
experience. So the fact that
Yeah.
he put himself so highly above not only the trainers but the support staff as well was just
Mhm.
it was just baffling to
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, it's really sad. I mean, the whole thing, I think, moral of the story from both of us is like, hopefully you hear these stories and you go, man, I do feel like I've done everything right. Like I have taken the time to interview these people. I've, vetted them to the best of my ability. And even then, things happen. Like I used to think that I did something wrong when I made a bad hire. And
Hmm.
hiring people is an art that you just continue to get better at. And honestly, still people have this way of getting like you have your BS meter and they have a way of BSing around it. Like
Hmm.
they get around it and they just sneak their way in and
Yeah.
you have to handle the situation the best of your ability once they are on your team, which we are going to speak to even more next episode. But anything else, Jessica, you want to share or mention?
No, I think that's my big story. I mean, I feel like I could pick and choose a lot of weird stories right now, but I think that's the most relevant one. But I think just tips and tricks. If you need to have a second interview because you're unsure of someone, then go for it. It's not
Yeah.
certainly not going to hurt. If you think that they're going to be a good fit for your team right after the audition, then jump on it and offer them a position right then and there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was something I had to really let go of. I was like determined to give them that second interview. And there were times where the market wasn't as crazy back then, but I remember telling them, okay, now our next step is a second interview. And they were kind of looking at me like, I've done so much already, but I'll figure it out.
Hmm.
Like, I'll make it happen again. And basically, they're coming in for unpaid time
Yeah.
still again for that next opportunity to potentially meet with you. So
Mhm.
it's something to consider for sure. But yeah, like Jessica said, if you're on the fence, don't, even if they're upset about having to do another interview, like that's even more of a
Mhm.
reason to do it. You really,
Yeah.
you should do it. So it gives you just the opportunity. And what the second interview for us looked like we said, was walk them around the facility, recapped policies, recapped procedures, recapped what you'd offered them for pay, um, really dot your I's and cross your T's and get really clear with them on exactly what they're going to expect. And maybe at that point, if you feel like you're still going to move forward with them, you could take them to maybe human resources, start the process, get things going. Um, or if you need more time to think about it, sending them away and saying we'll respond to you on this day and time. But that's always helpful too, to give them exactly when you're going to reach out to them,
Yeah.
when you're going to follow up with them, and then do it, because there's nothing worse than not hearing back from an employer. Like I would never do that to
Yeah.
someone. That would be, but it happens all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah, so be sure to keep up with, or keep organized with your applicants, because once you have a lot, which is a good problem to have, it's easy to lose track of people. So hang on to their, create a spreadsheet if you have to to get a hold of everybody, and where they're at. And actually giving them, like, how do you have any advice, Jessica, for like when you do reach out to someone and have to tell them no? This is kind of an impromptu question, but that's a hard one
That's
too.
always, that is
It's
a
always
hard
hard.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's never fun. I always like to just know what I'm going to say ahead of time, like, and have the reason why. I mean, you're never going to be direct with him and be like, hey, your audition sucked.
Hmm.
But just give them a specific reason why. And I actually have had a couple applicants who I'm pleasantly surprised with who said, thank you so much for the opportunity. What feedback do you have for me?
Hmm.
And I think that's just brilliant from an applicant. It shows me that even though it might not be a good fit, that they're still professional, and um, they could either take the feedback that I offer them or leave it. It is up to them at that point. But just knowing what I'm going to say ahead of time and not trying to argue with them about it,
Yes.
because
Yes.
some people get very defensive and they want to know
Hmm.
exactly why. And then you could say, well, I noticed that you didn't set this up correctly, or you taught this
Hmm.
incorrectly, and they could be very, very defensive, and you
Hmm.
don't want to get into like a tug of war with them at that point. And you don't, because arguing with
It's
them, what
not
is that
worth
going to
it.
accomplish? It's not going to
Yeah.
accomplish anything.
No.
So I like to go into that conversation knowing what I'm going to say, and just wish them the best.
Hmm. I think
Yeah.
that's super smart. Yeah, I just really, I sometimes would even just keep it as simple as, we decided not to move forward with you. Do you have any questions? And potentially they have those questions, and then you can do that back and forth. But you're exactly right. Not saying, not being defensive on your end. Just let them say their piece and what they think and believe that they have done, and you can just listen quietly, like be there to absorb it. But they're, or ask some questions, but you really don't need to take it any further.
No.
Another thing is, sometimes I would run into a voice machine, like leaving a
Oh
message.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think I would give it a try to hopefully speak to that person if you can. Like, it'd be great if you don't have to leave a voicemail, but if you can't get a hold of them and you need to just be done with that applicant, sometimes you do have to leave a voicemail. So
Yeah.
I've done it before. Don't feel like you can't do it. It's not fun for them to
Hmm.
get that voicemail, but you might hear from them, you might not. And just open up the door for them to, if you'd like to call me back and have any questions, feel free to call me back. But
Hmm.
I've had to leave that message before.
Yeah. It's not fun. It's not a fun conversation to have.
No, no. Yeah. So maybe grab a glass of wine if you're not at work. Do
If you
that.
are at work, then wait till you're done. Wait till the conversation is over and then get a glass of wine.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Do that. Very important.
That's the advice. That's the advice I have. Don't drink at work.
There you go. We're not condoning that. But yeah, thank you so much, Jessica. That was such good advice. And hopefully, if you have any questions to us, as always, feel free to reach out to us. Or if anyone hears anything that we might have mentioned or didn't mention today that was advice for that initial hiring process, all the way to this last potential second interview, or when you're considering hiring that person, what does that look like? And then maybe any advice you have when you had to send those rejection letters or rejection phone calls. It's not fun stuff, but it's definitely something we
Yeah.
have to do. And potentially the hiring stories you might have when you've made it to this point in that hiring process, because
Yeah.
it's nice to know that you're not alone sometimes, as we always say. But next
Absolutely.
episode, episode 6, we're super excited to talk about onboarding and what to do again if you are challenged with an applicant who makes it through this stage and you've decided, uh-oh, it's definitely a problem. Some ways to identify that and ways to handle that. So that's what we're looking forward to sharing with you next time. Thanks so much for listening.